My wife smells like a dead corpse.
My wife smells like dead corpse. Husband mocks wife in a gala. Esteemed viewers, welcome to Luxurious True Life Stories. Please like and subscribe for more captivating luxury true stories. Let's get into the story. Victoria Harald was known for her restraint as much as her brilliance. In a quiet European research facility, she worked with methodical precision, avoiding recognition while producing results that drew silent admiration from those around her. She spoke little, observed everything, and allowed her work to define her rather than applause. Instead of chasing academic prestige, Victoria made a calculated decision: she would build something of her own. Using carefully structured investments and layered corporate registrations, she founded a biotech company that operated without her public identity attached to it. Only a small circle of legal professionals knew the truth. To the world, the company appeared to run itself. Anonymity was not fear but strategy. Victoria believed power was strongest when unseen, and she preferred influence over attention. While industry leaders fought for headlines, she expanded her company quietly, laying foundations that would soon shape careers, fortunes, and lives, without anyone realizing her hand was behind it. Clinton Frederick lived in a cramped studio apartment overlooking a noisy intersection, the kind where sleep came in fragments and ambition filled silence. Every morning, he adjusted the single suit he owned, convincing himself that confidence could outshine worn fabric. Clinton was intelligent and relentlessly driven, but what fueled him most was a quiet fear of living an ordinary life. He submitted proposals, attended networking events, and spoke about innovation with a conviction that made people pause, yet opportunities rarely stayed long enough to change his circumstances. When a mid-sized biotech firm invited him to interview, Clinton prepared for days, rehearsing answers until they sounded effortless. The panel asked difficult questions, but he met each one with sharp reasoning and bold ideas. What he didn't know was that far from the conference room, the true owner of the company reviewed his file personally. Victoria Harald noticed something beyond his credentials, a relentless hunger that could either build greatness or destroy it. She approved his hiring without attaching her name, ensuring the decision looked routine. The offer letter arrived on a grey morning, and Clinton read it 3 times before the reality settled in. Relief quickly transformed into pride. He believed this was the moment his life turned because of his talent alone. Standing by his window, watching the city rush forward, he made a quiet promise to himself: he would rise fast, be recognized, and never return to the uncertainty he had known. Hidden from him entirely was the woman who had just altered his path, choosing to remain invisible while setting his future into motion. Clinton's first week at the company moved with electrifying speed. The offices were modern, efficient, and filled with people who spoke the language of progress. During a high-level strategy session reserved for select analysts, he noticed a woman seated near the end of the table, composed, attentive, and almost too calm for the intensity of the discussion. Victoria Harald appeared to be nothing more than a quiet consultant invited to observe, yet when she finally spoke, the room shifted. Her insight was concise but transformative, identifying a flaw in a development plan that could have cost millions. Clinton felt an immediate pull toward her mind. After the meeting, curiosity overcame hesitation. He approached her with professional courtesy, expecting brief politeness, but instead found himself in a conversation that flowed effortlessly. Victoria listened more than she talked, asking questions that revealed how carefully she processed the world. Clinton, who was used to proving himself in every interaction, felt strangely at ease. There was no competition in her presence, no need to impress, only a steady intelligence that sharpened his own thinking. As they walked out of the building beneath the fading glow of evening lights, Clinton carried an unfamiliar sense of anticipation. Victoria, however, remained internally measured. She had already studied his work, approved his entry into the company, and now observed how naturally ambition radiated from him. Their meeting appeared accidental, yet for Victoria it was simply the next quiet step in a design only she understood, one where proximity would reveal the true nature of the man whose future she had begun shaping. The project that brought them closer demanded long hours and absolute focus. A critical research deadline approached, and small teams were formed to prevent delays. Clinton found himself assigned alongside Victoria, whose steady presence quickly became the anchor of their workflow. While others grew tense under pressure, she remained composed, breaking complex problems into solvable parts. Clinton admired how she never raised her voice yet was always heard. Evenings often stretched late into the night, the office gradually emptying until only the quiet hum of equipment remained. Coffee cups accumulated, city lights shimmered beyond the windows, and conversations drifted beyond work. Clinton spoke about his determination to build a life that could not be ignored, while Victoria shared little about herself, choosing instead to ask thoughtful questions. He began to rely on her judgment, noticing that whenever uncertainty surfaced, she already seemed prepared for it. Trust formed without announcement. Clinton started seeking her opinion before presenting ideas, valuing her clarity more than the approval of louder colleagues. To him, Victoria felt reassuringly constant, someone who strengthened his path simply by walking near it. What he could not see was the deeper truth. Every opportunity surrounding him had quietly passed through her hands first. Yet Victoria never claimed credit, allowing him the confidence of believing he was advancing purely on his own momentum. What began as professional respect gradually softened into something neither of them rushed to name. Clinton noticed the small details first, how Victoria remembered the exact way he took his coffee, how she anticipated problems before they reached him, how her calm steadied even his most restless days. With her, the constant urgency inside him seemed to quiet. For the first time in years, success did not feel like a lonely climb. Their connection deepened outside the office through simple routines. They discovered a quiet bookstore tucked between all the buildings, shared unhurried dinners where conversation replaced distraction, and walked through evening streets without needing elaborate plans. Victoria never tried to impress him with status or possessions. Her simplicity felt genuine, almost refreshing. Clinton concluded she was grounded, intelligent, and untouched by the vanity he disliked in corporate circles. The absence of visible wealth reassured him that what grew between them was real. When Clinton proposed, it came from certainty rather than spectacle. One calm night, beneath soft city lights, he asked her to build a future with him. Victoria accepted without hesitation, her expression serene, but her thoughts deliberate. She chose not to reveal the empire she controlled, believing love should stand independent of power. If Clinton loved her without knowing who she truly was, then the foundation would be unshakable, or so she hoped. Their wedding was elegant but restrained, reflecting Victoria's preference for intimacy over display. Only a select circle attended, colleagues, a few distant relatives, and professional acquaintances who admired the couple's quiet compatibility. Clinton felt proud standing beside her, convinced he had chosen a partner defined by depth rather than extravagance. To him, their modest ceremony symbolized authenticity, a life built on substance instead of spectacle. Marriage seemed to sharpen his trajectory almost immediately. Within months, Clinton received expanded responsibilities at the company, followed by a promotion that surprised even senior staff. He credited relentless effort and strategic thinking, unaware that Victoria had carefully cleared obstacles before they reached him. She never interfered openly. Instead, she ensured his proposals were reviewed by receptive executives and that his risks had protective margins. Watching him grow brought her a private satisfaction that required no acknowledgement. At home, their rhythm felt balanced. Clinton spoke enthusiastically about future achievements while Victoria listened with quiet encouragement. She never competed for attention, never reminded him of influence, and never stepped forward to claim authority. To Clinton, it appeared that life was unfolding exactly as it should, talent rewarded, ambition validated, and marriage providing steady emotional ground. Hidden beneath that comfort was a truth he never thought to question. The momentum carrying him forward was not luck alone, but the invisible strength of the woman walking beside him. Recognition began arriving faster than Clinton expected. His name circulated in executive meetings, senior leaders nodded when he spoke, and colleagues started treating his opinions as direction rather than suggestion. Praise, once rare, became routine, and with it came a subtle shift in how he carried himself. He stood taller, spoke with firmer authority, and gradually developed a taste for being noticed. Invitations followed the recognition. Corporate dinners, private networking lounges, and strategy retreats introduced him to circles that measured worth through visibility. Clinton adapted quickly, refining his speech, upgrading his wardrobe, and studying the habits of influential people. Each compliment fed a growing certainty that he was shaping his destiny through sheer capability. At home, he talked more about where he was going than where he had been, his confidence expanding with every new opportunity. Victoria observed the change without interference. She noticed how gratitude appeared less frequently in his conversations, replaced by assumption. Where he once questioned outcomes, he now expected them. Still, she remained supportive, believing growth often tested humility before strengthening it. What she could sense, though Clinton could not, was the quiet emergence of ego, small but persistent, like a crack forming beneath a polished surface. Elaine Pascal arrived at the company like a sudden change in atmosphere, poised, perceptive, and impossible to overlook. Recently transferred from a partner firm, she possessed a social intelligence that allowed her to read a room within seconds. Her speech was warm without being familiar, her confidence carefully measured, and her presence lingered long after conversations ended. People listened when she spoke, not because she demanded it, but because she understood exactly how to hold attention. Clinton met her during a leadership workshop, where her questions were as sharp as her observations. She praised one of his presentations with thoughtful precision, highlighting strengths others had missed. The recognition felt different from routine workplace compliments. It suggested she understood the weight of ambition. Their discussions soon extended beyond meetings into polished cafes and after-work gatherings, where Elena spoke openly about influence, perception, and the importance of being seen. She encouraged Clinton to step fully into the success he had begun to taste. Victoria noticed Elena almost immediately. There was nothing overtly improper, only a subtle recalibration in Clinton's energy whenever Elena was near. He became more image-conscious, more selective about where he spent his time, more eager to occupy visible spaces. Elena never pushed. She simply affirmed the version of him that craved expansion. And like sunlight strengthening a rising structure, her attention quietly reinforced the ego already taking shape. Clinton's schedule grew increasingly crowded, filled with strategy dinners, executive briefings, and social gatherings that stretched late into the night. He began returning home with the distracted air of someone still mentally seated at a conference table. Conversations with Victoria shortened into summaries, then into simple updates. Where he once lingered to share details, he now spoke as though time itself had become too valuable for stillness. Gradually, he started refining the image he presented to the world, and that refinement extended into his private life. Victoria's preference for simplicity, once comforting, began to feel out of sync with the circles he was entering. He suggested subtle changes at first, more formal attire for events, a broader social presence, a willingness to be seen. Victoria listened without resistance but did not transform herself to match external expectations. Her steadiness, unchanged by status, quietly contrasted the momentum pulling Clinton outward. Elena's influence deepened during this shift. She understood the unspoken rules of visibility and guided Clinton through them with effortless ease, introducing him to rooms where reputation mattered as much as achievement. Around her, he felt aligned with the future he imagined, polished, respected, unmistakably successful. Without realizing it, he began measuring distance in new ways, between obscurity and recognition, between simplicity and prestige, and slowly, between the life he shared with Victoria and the image he was learning to inhabit. The accident occurred on an otherwise controlled afternoon inside one of the company's advanced laboratories. A preservation compound, designed to stabilize sensitive biological materials, reacted unpredictably during a calibration test. The substance was harmless once neutralized, but it released a stubborn odor that clung to anything it touched. Victoria had stepped in personally to prevent the situation from escalating, acting quickly to contain the reaction before it disrupted ongoing research. Despite immediate decontamination procedures, the scent refused to disappear entirely. It was faint yet unsettling, metallic with a cold sharpness that resisted soap, steam, and every fragrance layered over it. Specialists assured her the effect would fade with time, but the timing could not have been worse. That same evening, the company was hosting one of its most prestigious galas, an event attended by investors, innovators, and industry elites. Victoria considered staying away, yet absence might invite unnecessary questions about leadership. Clinton, already preparing for the event with visible excitement, barely noticed her concern. He spoke about the gala as an arena of opportunity, a place where impressions could redefine futures. Victoria listened quietly, masking her discomfort with composure. As twilight approached and the city prepared for another luminous night, she chose presence over convenience. What neither of them realized was that the faint scent trailing behind her would soon ignite a moment powerful enough to fracture everything they had built. The ballroom shimmered beneath cascading chandeliers, every surface reflecting quiet luxury. Conversations blended with soft music while servers moved gracefully through the crowd. Clinton stepped inside with unmistakable confidence, greeting influential guests as though he had always belonged among them. Victoria walked beside him in understated elegance, her composure steady despite the faint chemical scent she knew still lingered. Most people were too absorbed in the spectacle to notice, yet Clinton's heightened sensitivity to appearances made him unusually alert. As they joined a small circle of executives, the odor brushed past again, subtle but unfamiliar within the polished air. Clinton's expression tightened before smoothing into something sharper. With a half-laugh meant to entertain, he leaned slightly toward the group and said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "My wife smells like a dead corpse tonight." Perhaps the lab followed her here. A ripple of startled laughter moved outward, some guests reacting from discomfort rather than humor. Elena, standing nearby in flawless poise, watched silently, her eyes reflecting intrigue more than surprise. For a moment, time seemed to pause around Victoria. She neither flinched nor defended herself. Instead, she allowed the laughter to fade on its own. Her gaze rested calmly on Clinton, not with anger, but with a clarity that unsettled more than any visible reaction could have. The brightness of the ballroom suddenly felt colder, the distance between them unmistakable. What Clinton believed was a passing remark had already shifted the atmosphere, and without realizing it, he had stepped across a line from which everything would soon change. The laughter dissolved faster than it had formed, leaving behind a strained quiet that drifted through the nearby guests. Victoria did not rush to respond. Her stillness alone began drawing attention. She set her glass gently onto a passing tray, her movements unhurried, as though the moment required precision rather than emotion. When she finally spoke, her voice carried effortlessly, calm, controlled, and impossible to ignore. "I should clarify something," she said, meeting Clinton's gaze with composed certainty. "The laboratory you referenced, the one whose work you proudly represent, belongs to me." For a second, the words seemed too deliberate to register. A few executives exchanged confused glances, but recognition dawned quickly among those who had only interacted with the company through legal channels. Victoria continued without raising her tone, explaining that she was the founder and majority owner, the silent architect behind the organization's rise. Every promotion, every expanded authority Clinton had celebrated had ultimately passed across her desk. Color drained from Clinton's face as realization replaced confidence. The room, once warm with conversation, now held a focused silence. Victoria allowed the weight of truth to settle before delivering the final shift with the same unwavering composure. Effective immediately, she informed him his role within the company was terminated. No anger sharpened her words. They were clean, professional, irreversible. Around them, respect quietly repositioned itself, gravitating toward the woman who had never needed to announce her power. And in that single, measured moment, the foundation Clinton believed he stood upon vanished beneath him. News traveled with astonishing speed. By morning, private messages had turned into formal inquiries, and industry circles were already dissecting the Gala incident with clinical interest. Clinton's name, once spoken with admiration, now carried a cautionary tone. Invitations were quietly withdrawn, scheduled meetings postponed indefinitely, and professional contacts who once responded within minutes suddenly became unreachable. The same visibility he had pursued now magnified his fall. Clinton spent the early hours replaying the moment in relentless detail, the laughter, Victoria's composure. The instant authority shifted away from him. What unsettled him most was not only the loss of position but the realization that the success he claimed as self-made had always rested on unseen support. Without the company behind him, his influence thinned rapidly, revealing how dependent reputation could be on structure rather than personality. Across the corporate landscape, Victoria's decisive response earned measured respect. Leaders recognized the discipline it took to separate personal hurt from executive action, and her silence afterward only strengthened her credibility. Meanwhile, Clinton confronted a quieter reality. Recognition, once effortless, had been replaced by distance. For the first time in years, the momentum that defined his identity had stopped, leaving him alone with the echo of how quickly stature can dissolve when pride outruns awareness. In the days following the Gala, Elena's messages became noticeably brief, then infrequent, and finally absent altogether. Where she had once anticipated Clinton's schedule and suggested places worth being seen, there was now only silence. He told himself she was busy, that timing was simply inconvenient, yet a quiet certainty grew within him. Elena had always moved toward momentum, never toward decline. They crossed paths once in a financial district corridor, the encounter so controlled it felt rehearsed. Elena greeted him with polite neutrality, her expression composed but distant. She spoke of shifting priorities and demanding travel, choosing words that revealed nothing while closing every door. There was no confrontation, no lingering conversation, only a graceful detachment that made their former familiarity feel imagined. Before parting, she offered a restrained nod, the kind reserved for professional acquaintances rather than trusted allies. As she disappeared into the steady rhythm of the crowd, Clinton understood what had changed. Elena had not been anchored to him. She had been aligned with the version of him that was rising. Without the gravity of status, their connection simply lost direction. The realization settled heavily. Some presences are drawn not by who a person is, but by the altitude they appear to maintain. And once that altitude fades, so do they. Clinton's world grew noticeably smaller. Mornings no longer carried urgency, and the structured cadence of corporate life had been replaced by long, unoccupied hours. He attempted to reconnect with former colleagues, but conversations remained courteous and short, as though everyone preferred distance over involvement. For the first time in years, he was forced into stillness, and in that stillness, reflection arrived uninvited. Details he had once overlooked began assembling into uncomfortable clarity. The promotions that had seemed perfectly timed, the projects approved with unusual ease, the quiet protection from decisions that might have damaged his reputation, none of it had been accidental. Victoria had never demanded recognition, yet her influence had shaped nearly every step of his ascent. What he once labelled as personal triumph now appeared intertwined with her silent support. The memory of the gala returned often, not as a dramatic scene, but as a single irreversible sentence spoken too lightly. Pride, he realized, rarely announces its presence. It grows gradually until humility feels unnecessary. Sitting by his window one muted afternoon, Clinton understood that the sharpest losses are not always financial or professional. Sometimes they are the result of failing to recognize the value of what stood beside you while you were busy looking ahead. Victoria stepped into public leadership without theatrics, announcing her role through a concise press release that emphasized continuity rather than disruption. Industry analysts responded with immediate curiosity. The once anonymous founder revealed a record of disciplined growth and unusually stable innovation pipelines. When she appeared at her first executive briefing, her calm authority settled the room faster than any grand introduction could have. She spoke clearly about direction, accountability, and long-term impact, outlining strategies that balanced scientific ambition with responsible expansion. Inside the company, employees discovered a leader who valued precision over noise. Processes were refined, communication clarified, and research teams received resources aligned carefully with measurable goals. Victoria walked through laboratories and development floors with attentive focus, asking questions that demonstrated both technical mastery and practical awareness. Confidence spread quietly across departments, not driven by excitement alone, but by the steady assurance that the organization was guided by someone who understood every layer of its foundation. Beyond corporate walls, partnerships strengthened and new collaborations formed, drawn by her reputation for thoughtful execution. Yet Victoria herself remained unchanged at the core, composed, observant, and uninterested in spectacle. Recognition followed naturally, but she treated it as confirmation rather than destination. What defined this new chapter was not visibility alone, but the clarity of leadership, a presence no longer hidden, shaping the future with the same deliberate strength that had always existed beneath the surface. With stability firmly restored, Victoria directed her attention toward a vision she had long protected, expanding biotech solutions beyond commercial success into meaningful global impact. She initiated a humanitarian research division focused on affordable treatment technologies, ensuring that innovation would not remain limited to those who could easily access it. The announcement drew widespread respect, not because it was dramatic, but because it reflected foresight rather than reaction. Teams formed quickly, energized by a purpose larger than quarterly outcomes. Laboratories once dedicated solely to competitive advancement now balanced discovery with accessibility. Victoria remained deeply involved, reviewing frameworks, encouraging interdisciplinary collaboration, and insisting on ethical clarity in every development phase. Her leadership style inspired quiet dedication. People worked not from pressure, but from belief in the direction she established. As the initiative gained momentum, Victoria sensed an internal shift as well. The past no longer occupied her thoughts with the same weight. What remained was experience, instructive, but no longer defining. She moved forward with sharpened awareness, understanding that reinvention is less about becoming someone new and more about stepping fully into the strength that was always present. Months later, on a cool afternoon softened by pale sunlight, Clinton stood near the edge of a crowded innovation forum open to the public. He had come quietly, drawn by curiosity more than intention, blending easily into the anonymity of the audience. Conversations drifted around him, filled with admiration for a keynote leader whose work was redefining industry standards. When Victoria entered the hall, the atmosphere shifted, not loudly, but with the natural gravity that accompanies earned respect. She moved with the same composed rhythm he remembered, yet there was a visible expansion in her presence now. People listened attentively, not out of obligation but genuine regard. Clinton watched from a distance, struck not by surprise but by the clarity of what he was seeing. She had always carried this strength. Only his perception had been incomplete. There was no bitterness in the realization, only a quiet acknowledgment of how profoundly he had underestimated her. Their eyes met briefly across the space, recognition passing without disruption. Victoria offered a small, courteous nod before continuing forward, her focus already returning to the discussions awaiting her. The exchange lasted only seconds, yet it carried the calm finality of two lives no longer traveling the same direction, one defined by steady ascent, the other by reflection and the slow work of understanding. Clinton requested the meeting through formal channels, expecting it might never be granted. When the confirmation arrived, it contained only a time and location: Victoria's office, late afternoon. The space was refined but understated, reflecting her preference for clarity over excess. She greeted him with professional courtesy, inviting him to sit, her expression calm and unreadable. He spoke without rehearsed language, choosing honesty over polish. Clinton acknowledged the arrogance that had clouded his judgment and the careless remark that altered both their lives. He admitted that losing his position had forced him into a level of self-examination he had avoided for years. There was no attempt to justify his behavior, only a measured acceptance of responsibility. The apology was quiet, stripped of expectation. Victoria listened without interruption. When he finished, she thanked him for his sincerity and accepted the apology with composed grace. Yet her response carried gentle finality. Forgiveness, she explained, restores peace but does not always restore proximity. Some chapters close so that growth can continue without reopening old fractures. Clinton nodded, understanding that reconciliation does not always mean return. He left her office lighter than when he entered, aware that closure is sometimes the most generous outcome two people can share. Spring arrived with a sense of renewal that seemed to mirror Victoria's life. Her company continued to expand responsibly, her humanitarian division now delivering breakthroughs that reached communities far beyond corporate borders. Recognition followed naturally, invitations, honors, partnerships, yet she accepted each with the same steady composure that had always defined her. Success, to her, was no longer about proving strength, but about using it with intention. Outside of work, Victoria allowed herself something she had once postponed: space to live without constant vigilance. She rediscovered simple pleasures, quiet mornings, unhurried travel, evenings untouched by urgency. The past no longer echoed with sharpness. It existed only as a reminder of the clarity she had gained. Humiliation had not diminished her, it had revealed the depth of her resilience and the quiet certainty of her worth. Standing by the wide windows of her office one golden evening, Victoria watched the city move with tireless rhythm. Lives advanced, paths diverged, and new stories formed beyond her view. She felt no need to look backward. What lay ahead was shaped not by betrayal, but by choice, and she stepped toward it with calm confidence, fully aware that true power never needed to announce itself to be real. As this story comes to an end, remember that behind every luxury lies a truth few ever see. If this story moved you, support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Until the next unforgettable true story, stay inspired and stay curious.